I think because you come from different culture, different background, usually we have probably three things. You have the Islam itself, which resembles in the Quran and Sunnah, as you mentioned. And we have Muslims, which are different, and sometimes we practice and we don't practice and so forth. And we have the history of Islam, which has got sometimes, some downfalls, and sometimes, something you can look at. So how's your experience with these three things together? How it came about? What's your interaction with these three elements of Islam?
Well, for me, to be perfectly honest, I actually found reading the Quran it was actually quite hard work to start with. But as soon as I read the Seerah, everything just dropped into place. I then understood everything, and it made reading the whole of the Quran so much easier.
Seerah is the life of Muhammad.
And I just sort of picked up one book after another, and I just found that it just made all of the pieces, the jigsaw, just drop into place, and it made you really appreciate that. Some of the things that get taken completely and utterly out of context, and that's the whole point. It's all taken out of context. And it's in there for a reason, and unless you actually understand those reasons behind it, you can't get a full grasp of what actually being said and what actually is being meant in the Quran. The second issue there is, yes, there is an awful lot of extracting the cultural from the religious side of things, and that is not always the easiest thing to do in the world. You really, I think, certainly for me, it meant asking, where is that in Islam? Something would happen, somebody would say something would be said, or an action would be undertaken, and for me, I think, well, I'd then start to question it. Well, where in Islam is that, or is that cultural? If it's cultural, well, I can park it. If it's Islamic, then I'll take it on.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things that that Stuart's saying, and certainly in one of the pieces of research that I read, a lot of converts find that people that are born Muslims, a lot of their Islamic practices come from a cultural upbringing rather than one that's based on education. So, for example, I've met brothers in Jummah from Pakistani background, and I've said how they've said, how long have I been a Muslim? And I tell them, and then I always say, well, how long have you been practicing? Okay, and the brother said to me, he said, well, most of my upbringing was cultural, but I would say in the last 4 years, I've really tried to understand what Islam is and why my parents told me that I needed to pray, or why my parents told me that before I pray I should wash in a certain way, and not just to accept what they said, but to try and follow the example of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the companions of Muhammad and those generations afterwards. In terms of the history of Islam that you talk about, I would say that I was really, when we talk about the history of Islam, brother, you probably have a lot more knowledge on me on this, but when I think about the history of Islam, I think about, though in Islam I believe we're one ummah, for example, but over time different schools of thought have formed, which have a lot in common. So the main two areas of Islam is Shia Islam and Sunni Islam. 80% of Muslims in the world are Sunni Muslims. Okay, and then if you read about the history, you can see within that there are different schools that have established that they take different views on how you should practice as a Muslim, but in terms of beliefs, in terms of Aqidah, they have a lot in common. Anyway, I don't want to get too complicated and go into depth because it's probably beyond the remit of this talk. But I was very lucky in that my first masjid that I was a member of, my first mosque that I was a member of, I moved out of London and moved to Exeter. And Exeter only had one masjid, one city. Okay? And this makes a big difference because it means all the Muslims from all the different backgrounds, they come together and they pray together as one ummah. okay? And it wasn't the Bangladeshi Association of Exeter's Mosque. It wasn't the Pakistani Association of Exeter's Mosque. And you can find that in all of you can find that all over this country, where people have set up cultural centres, you know, and everybody on the committee comes from one background. I was really lucky in Exeter that they had a very diverse background on the committee. They had an imam, the leader of the mosque, was a Sudanese chap from Darfur who was very well educated, but also loved living in this country and encouraged people to be very good neighbours. Okay, so that encouraged unity for me. But in terms of divisions, I've only been ever asked once, which madhab are you, or which school do you follow? Imagine, I've been a Muslim for 13 years. I've never been asked, are you? As soon as they know I'm convert, they never ask me if I'm Sunni. They never ask if I'm Sunni. They never ask if I'm Shia or what school I'm in. Okay, for people, when you're a convert, they're just happy that you've come into Islam. But then after that, after some time, I tried to study and try to find out. I still have so much to learn. In many ways, I'm just following other people until I have the time to study.
But the easiest thing, well, for what I always find, is that is to keep it simple, which is you have the 5 pillars. So it doesn't. I'm really not bothered where I actually go and pray. I will pray in any of the masjids, masajid in Reading, anywhere really, and that to me that's the most important thing, because the relationship with God is the most important thing in the whole of my life.
I had a friend growing up, and she used to like come to my house and she's not Muslim, but she enjoyed a lot of things that we did. She liked the concept of Ramadan, and she used to ask me always the question, how do you like Islam as a religion? And she's like, there's other things I don't agree with. It's like, and I think a few friends at her school like told her about some things that people do more, and she's like, they're probably trying to convert me. And she's saying to me like, okay, I agree with a lot of things, but there's those that I don't agree with, and I don't see the point in converting when I'm going to be a rebel Muslim. Like, I see that, look, they are Muslims, they still, you know, do things that they shouldn't do stuff. But I didn't even know what to say to her then. I just kind of ignored. I'm sure when you first converted, you had some doubts. What helped you surpass those doubts?
Well, for me, it was, I think, as I said to you, it was that 80-20 position. But I was really happy with that 20% of what had been what I didn't understand. And I think if you, when you accept Islam, you have to, you accept it unreservedly. And if somebody's not ready, then Allah has not made them ready to accept Islam. But inshallah, you know, you will have planted the seed of thought in for the future. And one of these days, they may well come along and say, well, did they actually say to you what they were unhappy about? Or,
yes, like relationships, alcohol, I don't know, just those things. When I try to take it, we don't do this, which is like, yeah, but I want to do it anyway. And it's like, I know it's wrong, I appreciate that it's wrong, but I don't want to be in a religion where
Yeah.
allow them and they go against my religion.
yeah, that's fair enough. But inshallah, you know, one of these days she'll find that that is, I think, part of being young and being in the West, and that, to my mind, is a real danger for Muslims growing up in the West in the next few years or so. So certainly for the next generation.
If I knew somebody like that, but I would still encourage them if they are in agreement with the main beliefs. Because if we look at the establishment of Islam, my understanding is that Muhammad, peace be upon him, he taught people for 13 years about the belief system before they actually had to start practicing the religion. And it was over a period of time that rules were applied. Okay, so for example, in the early days, people could still drink alcohol. Okay, it was not banned, and then it was introduced, and then from that point, people stopped drinking, consuming alcohol. So, what I would say, if the person fundamentally agrees with it, it would be really good for them to embrace the religion. and you can say to them that with time, you know, with Imam, you can stop those things that are not permitted. And in my early days of being a Muslim, I still got involved a lot with music and going to nightclubs and so on. I actually worked as a nightclub DJ for 7 years after becoming a Muslim. I actually got the because I was still very into it, and I didn't see any issue with it. I said to myself, if I go into a club and I'm not looking at things, and I'm not drinking, and I'm not talking to women like too much, then it's all right, isn't it? Or in it, you know. But so I wasn't at that stage to give up those aspects, you know. And I remember DJing in the club. You know, I was DJing in this room where there was glass windows, and there was some guys knocking on the window with big beards, and they say, "You should stop. You should stop doing that." But I said, "I've got to finish these songs. These people are listening." Okay, but I did stop after time. You know, there came a stage for me when I realised that wasn't working for me. Okay, as a Muslim, and so I wasn't prepared. That wouldn't have been a barrier for me embracing Islam. Actually, I read a book which was not related to me, wasn't related to going out, and wasn't related to free mixing at all. But it was by a Muslim sister from Sudan, and it just really opened my mind. And I just woke up one day and I said, I don't want to do that kind of work anymore. I don't like the environment, and it doesn't work for me. You know. So that's what I would say. The Imam side has to come first. And none of us are perfect. All of us as Muslims have so many of our actions to perfect, from averting the eyes and so on. You know, every day is a day for self-improvement.
Thank you very much, brother, for sharing with us your story, especially Manuel, because I have known you for about 2 years, and I have never dared to ask you why you became Muslim. The reason why, because I have a friend of mine who was he used to be a priest, and he used to hate people asking him the question, because can you imagine everybody asking you the same question, how did you become Muslim? It's a long story, isn't it?
And a lot of people assume that they assume that a white person, they're not used to seeing many white Muslims, so they assume that I'm a light-skinned Arab. So, you know, they ask me where my parents... I've often been asked in the mosque when people meet me, where are your parents from? Because they assume that, you know, my parents are...
My question is to Stuart, because he said he didn't find any problems when it was very smooth for you.
Yeah.
Because I remember we had one student here about 2 years ago who reverted to Islam, and unfortunately some of the brothers make it very hard for him. I mean, you know, the first day he was being taught how to make the special supplication to go into the bathroom. You know, the guy just started learning, you know, Shahada, so he didn't find this...
some people can go into burnout.
To make you,
but actually, this is not just in Islam. You see people, they become obsessed and they totally immerse themselves in something, and then after 2 years they're out of it. Yeah. Okay, and if you go on the internet, you can even find something that's called Salafi burnout. Okay, and there's some people that have very tough upbringing, then they get attracted to very austere Islam. I don't know if that's the best expression, and they get it becomes everything for them. And they just totally go into it, and then after a couple of years, that's it. Sorry, I've just done this too much, and it's just too much. But so I just recommend that people take it slowly, step by step. Yeah. System, please. Being so.
Not aware, but you know when they ask you questions, like your family, your parents, you know, because in Islam you have to listen to your brother. Did you ask them from the beginning, was the
Well, my parents had the attitude that if it makes you happy, okay, and you're not going to go out and harm people, then and I'm not just talking about Islam here. You know, if I wanted to go out drinking heavily every night, they wouldn't recommend that because they say you're harming yourself. Okay, so if you find something that makes you happy, whatever it is, a religion, some kind of sport, and it's good for you and it's good for those around you, that's fine. Okay, But there was there was some concerns in my family when I first became a Muslim, you know, especially you know, in terms of treatment of women. That was interesting because I was the person who was becoming a Muslim to you know, to marry a lady, but you know, they were a bit concerned about that. But I think over time, especially on my mother's side, she's become increasingly religious on the Christian side, and of course, you know, I hope one day she would become, you know, she may be going to Islam. You know, as anybody of any religion hopes that somebody will come to their religion, and we've had a lot of talks. And if you talk to Christians, if you ask them who they pray to when they're in need, they will say that they pray to God. Okay. Some of them will say they pray to Jesus, but most will say they pray to God. That's what I see is their instinctual thing. Their instinctual thing is to pray to you know, to one God. And in terms of my workplace, most of my experiences have been positive. Okay, so where I am right now, I'm the only Muslim. There's 110 employees. I'm the only Muslim. Okay, and the guy who owns the business. It's typical English environment. People like a bit of banter, okay? And banter means you take the mick out of each other, you make fun of each other. It's like English culture. It's not that rude. They make fun of me, but I may make a bit of fun of them as well. Okay, and he comes out, he says, we're going to have an annual conference, Emmanuel. Okay, and obviously if there's a prize, it can't be a bottle of champagne for you. Would you like a prayer mat instead? You know, and they'd be very understanding. You know, there's no other Muslims in the workplace who said, now we've moved to a big head office and I've got my own, it's a small office, but I've got my own office, can I pray when I'm there? That's fine. Okay, so I felt really shy at first, because I have to close the door, but it's got a massive window in it. So everybody can see me when I'm praying. And I felt nervous. I felt nervous to get up and pray for that first couple of weeks. Because in my upbringing, you go to another room, you go to a private place when you pray. But they needed to know what I was doing, so I realised that window was really good. They knew not to disturb me because the door was closed, but they could still see what I was doing. And Stuart probably shares with me, every time you do Ramadan, and this might be more for us as converts, I don't know, but certainly as a convert, maybe there's some link, but people ask a lot of questions during Ramadan. Are you mad? How can you do what you're doing? But that triggers the conversation.
As far as my parents are concerned, my father passed away 12 years ago, so it was well and truly before I converted. So, but my parents were divorced, so I've got a stepmother and a mother. And my mother, she's I think like Emmanuel's mother, she's pretty much a practicing Christian. So she understood, and she had absolutely no issues with it at all. She's been very supportive. We've talked about it a lot, and the same as my stepmother as well. She doesn't hold any great religious beliefs, but very understanding. And alhamdulillah, Allah has made it easy for me. I know there are a lot of people who He hasn't made it easy for, and it's certainly a test for them. My family in general, everybody's been fine. Friends have been really kind, supportive. Work again. Alhamdulillah, no real problems.
Yeah, well, thanks to Allah.
Absolutely. So, but the thing is, though, I think with my family, they've probably seen it's that sense of inner contentment that I found as soon as I converted to Islam, because Emmanuel touched on it earlier on. It's effectively like that rat race. That well, okay, well, I've got this mobile phone. The next one coming out, I need that one. There's a bigger, better TV coming out. There's a car coming, you know, sort of, and constantly there's this drive to push you forward. You know, well, I need the next thing. I need to get my next fix to make me feel better. The only thing that I ever found, and actually satisfied my inner need for, in terms of contentment, is Islam. And that's it. It's as pure and as simple as that.
This is more to Stuart. You said that there was sort of 20% of the things in Islam that you found difficult to deal with. Could you outline what they were and how you have got over that problem?
Yeah, no, very good question. Yeah, essentially, yes, the issue over women. That was really the, I think was the big, about hijab, about niqab, about, and that, you know, I think I was still running on the general misconception that, you know, still portrayed in the press. But as I say, I'd done quite a lot of reading, and I'd seen, and I'd read particularly sort of in this era about the women in the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the way that he treated them with respect and with dignity. And I thought, you know, something's getting lost in the translation here. I know what in Islam, I know in Islam it's got to be the right thing. I know some sisters wear hijab, some don't. No, that's a personal choice. So, and as I say, that to me was, I think, about the biggest, was about the biggest issue for me. And but I thought, underlyingly, I knew that there's a reason for it. And as I say, I'm now having spoken to you know, to sisters and understanding about how they feel about it, that it's given me that peace of mind. So yeah, that's it.
After the conversion, there was a lot of information coming in, and you yourself overwhelmed with all the information. And with all due respect, did you ever like want to give up, or said that's enough?
I'll answer that particular question right away. No, never wanted to give up. And in terms of information overload, yes, there's a lot of information out there. And I think as I touched on earlier on, I soon realised that it's a marathon. There are scholars who study a lifetime and they still don't learn everything, and they still don't know everything. I've been a Muslim, you know, sort of 2 weeks or whatever it is, and I want to know everything. I want to know it now. And then you realise that's just not going to happen. And so, inshallah, you know, you learn at your own pace. You learn as and when you're ready, as and when Allah gives you the time to do it. So, but no, I've never ever wanted to, never had any thoughts, any doubts of saying this is the wrong thing I've done.
When I converted to Islam 13 years ago, this was in Exeter as well, so it wasn't near London. There wasn't very much literature available there, but I just concentrated more on practicing the pillars. I didn't tend to read a great deal, and I just took it slowly. And I remember in the early years, people said to me, they said, "Are you going to come to Taraweeh?" And I said, "I'm not going to go because I don't understand Arabic." You know, that was just for me, it was just like, I can't stand there for an hour, because Taraweeh is the evening prayers during Ramadan. And if you attend it from the first night to the last night, you will hear the whole of the Quran recited. And that's by someone who knows the whole Quran by heart. And this is the amazing thing. One of the amazing things in the Muslim world is that there are, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people who've memorized the Quran. Okay, so but it just didn't register with me at the time what I was missing out on. But on another level, I wasn't quite ready for it. I think so. I didn't really have information overload, but what I did have is you're a convert, so I better tell you how to pray thing. You know, and so what would happen is you go into a mosque. And people would show you how to make wudu, and that's fairly common. But when you're praying, you get some people, they go, right, you must put the feet together when you pray, when you're standing in the line, you've got to. And then other people, when you try to put your foot next to them, they'll be moving it away. So you have people like this, and you have other people like this.
Yep.
You know, so, they give you quite strong, you know, they make quite a strong justification, and I don't have any, and I still don't have a vast Islamic knowledge, a sort of hadith to rely on, and so on. And I've got fairly soon after becoming a Muslim, I started a family, and that took up a lot of time. So I tried to put some time aside, but nowhere near a scholar, nowhere near a student of a student of a scholar of a scholar. So I've still got a long way to go. But what has happened to me as time has gone on, and I think happens to other converts, they become more confident, they realise the nuances within the sort of nuances, as in small differences within the Muslim community, that you know, the way to the main movements in prayer are in common between all Muslims, and the other bits, they're finer details. And as you increase in faith, and you want to observe it more thoroughly, then you'll pay more attention to it. But the most important thing is to really understand the belief system in Islam.
And I think I went to this bookshop down the Woking Road, it's called As-Sabil, and I went in there, and the brother in there gave me a children's book, and alhamdulillah, that's all I needed, just an absolute my first prayer book. That was it, and you know, it had all of the basics, and you know, nothing. You know, it really is the simple things, and like I say, it really should be keep it simple, and from a convert side, and then if you want to learn more, fine, but just keep it simple, and just you are a child, you're a baby, you're an infant in terms of knowledge. So is getting over the ego side of things and realising that that is the best way to learn, because it is designed specifically for children who don't understand a lot. So if it's not for you, well, get over it and just learn it. Because that's the most important thing.
Question for Brother Emmanuel. You were saying that you're the only Muslim in a workplace of like 100 people.
Yeah.
I'm in a similar situation where my course, I'm on a different campus, and it's just me and like 15 other girls, and I'm the only Muslim. And there's no Muslims on my campus at all. And sometimes the girls get together and they engage in quite inappropriate conversation, and I'm not sure how to deal with that. Like, what advice would you give, since you're in that situation as well? Because I would just
Glad you got that one, not me.
Well, I work in the male-dominated car industry. I'm an accountant, but the British male working culture, when men are on their own, I don't know if this applies in other parts of the world, but there's a lot of swearing. Some of them use it as verbal punctuation. You know. But the interesting thing I find is with my colleagues is that when they come and have a chat with me, people that are known to, you know, every other word is a swear word, they stop swearing when they talk to me. I don't tell them, they just sort of realise that I'm not responding the way that I'm not responding in the same way. In terms of the inappropriate conversation, for the people I work with, they're not Muslims, so sometimes the guys send around inappropriate emails, you know, but they don't copy me in. Okay, including the joke ones about Muslims. But I find them out. Okay, some of them are funny. So they tend to be sensitive. They tend to respect me. But if I feel like, you know, if they say, well, you know, what do you think about this lady who works for the other company who came in the other day? I try not to engage in it the way that they would like me to, and they respect that anyway. In a way, they're just having a bit of fun, trying to push me to get involved in their banter. But but it is difficult, because if you're in the room, you want to feel part. You want to feel part of the party, but also you bring something to it. You know, you bring, God willing, you bring an integrity. You know, you bring a modesty. And we all need to improve on it, but hopefully we can bring that.
Because I do feel like sometimes I go off and pray a lot, and then there is like a distance between me and them, and sometimes I think, is it me, or is it? So it's just.
You believe in Allah. You believe in Muhammad Rasulullah. It's all we can be friendly with people. Okay, but our closest friends will be those who share our deepest beliefs. Okay, so I still have friends that I grew up with, and I still spend time with them. But there's something very deep, very personal that I can't share with them. You know, I may discuss it at times, but that'll make the difference. So, you know, but that's the commitment that you've made. You know. And the other choice is to go the other way, and you see the people that, you know, my name's Mo, my name's Cass. You know, they're like in the closet. You know, they're not expressing their Islam, and people don't mind if you do, on the whole, in British society. You know, there's a lot of Islamophobia, but in my workplace, no one has ever come to me and given me abuse or told me to stop doing what I'm doing. You know, they're understanding. You know, and ignorance, when you encounter it, it's an opportunity. You know, because ignorance is damaging the one who's ignorant more than it's damaging you.
It's not going to be easy for you, but inshallah, you know, you stick to it. Stick to your beliefs. Stick to your guns, and that will be the most important thing.
You mentioned your friend who was from Nigeria, and he said he didn't talk with you about Islam and never mentioned anything. What do you think our role as Muslims, coming out of Muslim background, so we were already converted just like you, to the people who we are making friends with, or not Muslims? Do you think that we should talk about it? Do you think we just let them lead it to what we are trying to say? Or how do we do it?
I think we should find, as Muslims, and we do have a lot of times, we're living as a minority here, and also at university you are with people that they have at a particular time in their life when they're going to listen, okay? And they may not take what you say right now and put it into practice, but they will remember that. As long as it's not in there's, you know, in the Quran, I think there's an ayah, there's no compulsion in religion. We mustn't force it on people, but also there's a lot of misinformation about Islam out there, okay? And we need to go out there and first of all, for our behaviour, show them what being a Muslim is all about. Being a good neighbour, being a good friend, being a good citizen of this society and making a positive contribution. Okay, and then also to pass on the information as well. Okay, it's God who will choose whether that person's heart will be guided towards Islam.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, anybody who expresses an interest, that's an open question. You know, give them as much information as they want. When you see that they've had enough, stop. It worked for me because it was those little bits of just sort of, okay, well, a little bit of information, go away, think about it, but then maybe more questions. But having worked on the dawah stall in the town centre, you find that people, 95% people, just thank you but no thank you, not interested. But alhamdulillah, the 5% who are interested, really interested, and the ones who want to stop, they often have a very, very positive view of Muslims. And it really is an opportunity for you to go out there and to give that positive opportunity, view of Muslims at such an early age. So thank you.
Jazakallah.